Welcome to this special edition of African Voices platform. My name is Chiwe Chihana and I'll be hosting you tonight. Tonight's edition is in partnership with Migration Matters Festival and the Racial Justice Network. We've called it Resist, Remember, Repair. And that's borrowed from the Racial Justice Network's work that they've recently done in Kenya on decolonizing education. With me, we're not in a studio today, where we're all at home, but I've got a guest from Kenya, I've got two guests from the Racial Justice Network, and they'll be introducing themselves in a moment. Hello, Remy. Welcome to African Voices platform.
Hello, thank you for having us. I think it's three people from the Racial Justice Network, two that are based in the UK and one that's based in Kenya, or at least that's the direction that I think we're hoping to move in. But it's great to be here and great to be able to find ways to connect even in these times.
Brilliant, thank you. And Penny, please introduce yourself.
So I'm Penina Wangari Jones, and I'm an activist, organizer, and the director of the Racial Justice Network. Yeah, and I am lucky enough to I live in the UK, obviously, but I was born and bred in Kenya, which is partly why we've done this work. So yeah, that's the perspective I'll be bringing in.
Brilliant. And Givuku, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everybody. My name is Dungi Givuku from Nairobi, Kenya. And I am an artivist. I use art, that is poetry, spoken word, filmmaking for social justice. Happy to be on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to have all of you on this show. I have been trying to get Racial Justice Network to join us for all the amazing work. It's quite a wide library right now, and we're going to be unpicking some of that. But it would be remiss of me if I ignored the current environment that we're in, where we find ourselves in a global movement to tackle police brutality following the passing of George Floyd in America. But this is historic, it's endemic, and it's not exclusive to the American system. This is something that we experience in the United Kingdom as well. And I would say that in an African context, there are different perspectives and different ways in that and how that's impacting society. I wondered, Penny, if you could speak a bit to that.
Yeah, you're right. I think definitely, I know Racial Justice Network has been busy in terms of people coming forward and stepping up, but also testimonies. The downside of that is the feeling that we've been talking about this for a while. You said yourself, this is not started now. This is like goes back way centuries. So our tagline is ending racial injustice and addressing colonial legacies, because we believe a lot of what we experience and have now roots all the way to that. And also, this is so nice to hear in the background as well.
It's lovely, yeah.
Yeah, so it goes back all that way, and in enslavement of people. So what we're feeling is it's sad that the movement has emerged on obviously somebody who's George Floyd, who's died under the circumstances that he did, and now people are stepping forward. But it's also the triggers and the trauma that is bringing up with a lot of us who've been in different situations, because I've said maybe in more recent media coverings around that when you see what we see and observe, we're not just seeing somebody dying. That is the equivalent of a brother, an uncle, a dad, and we know our sisters, our mothers, our daughters, for example, are also kind of dying in similar conditions, and seeing it replayed over and over in the media, but also feeling the frustrations of the community, us. Yeah, that's been quite hard. Yeah, so I don't know whether others would want to say anything, but I think maybe just because I know there's a lot that's going to probably come up. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think as well, one of the interesting things about the dynamics with policing is the catalyst has been in the US and the videos of George Floyd, but I think what we've been trying to say at the Racial Justice Network is that this is a global problem. It's a problem we have in the UK. We've seen a lot during the pandemic and the lockdown that it's been black and brown communities that have been massively over-policed in the UK. They've been victim to taser use, police brutality, excessive amounts of stop and search. So not only is it a problem in the US and the UK and the West where black people are minoritized, but we can also link it to what's going on the African continent as well. The very nature of policing, which is a very, very oppressive institution, is a colonial imposition. You know, there were African systems in different territories of Africa that found different ways to find justice. So policing is a colonial system and we need to understand it as such. There's also agencies like G4S that are incredibly tied to the police and often doing a lot of the police's work. In the UK, G4S are managing the housing of people seeking asylum. In Israel and Palestine, G4S are active in oppressing Palestinians. And G4S are also all over the African continent. So there are a lot of connections for us to draw on.
Absolutely. Givuku, how is the experience there for you? I mean, I'm of Zambian heritage. So in the last 2 weeks alone, whilst the world has been talking about George Floyd, the American situation and the UK situation, we had one of the mayor of Lusaka, which is the capital city of Zambia, come out and actually challenge Chinese employers for abusing workers in Zambia, getting them to stay overnight against labor laws in the country. And this was televised, but a few days after that, senior government officials threatened this mayor and he had to retract this. Then more recently, some artists have come out and Zambian artists have spoken out against this injustice and challenged the government for not standing with the people. I just wonder whether that is something that we can draw a parallel from, you being in Kenya and me speaking of the Zambian context.
Well, yeah, there's the Zambian situation vis-a-vis the Chinese question is the same. It is the same in most countries in Africa right now, where we have what we are calling the new colonialism, that we are inviting new masters into our midst. In relation to police brutality, yes, George Floyd is what we are talking about right now. But it does not mean that Kenyans have not been killed almost every day by police, you know. And what is happening, the trend has been that most of the people being killed are from the informal sector, the informal settlement areas. So you find that there is a link between class and the rule and the people who are ruling. So those who are living in affluent areas are not targeted by police, but those who are living in Mathare, those who are living in Kibera slums, those who are living in Korogosho are being shot every day. So just like 2 days ago, a homeless man was shot, you know, for being outside after curfew hours. But he was homeless. Where else was he supposed to be? So we'll be having a demonstration on Monday, coming Monday the 8th, where we'll be protesting not only against the killing of that particular man, but of all those who have been shot by police, especially during this COVID time. I may not have the numbers now, but one of the things we are saying is that police in Kenya have actually killed more people than the COVID-19. You know, people have been shot. There is a kid called Yasin Juma on the second day of the curfew, who was shot from the balcony of his family home in Huruma, another informal settlement. And definitely what we are pushing for is for the police who are responsible for these to be taken to court so that justice can be done. It has not been easy in the past. We have had police killings happening with impunity, where police who shoot are let free, and we are not happy about that. And when you look at the circumstances, you find that mostly it's people from a poor background that are being targeted. So when you link this with what is happening in the US right now, you find that the trait is the same. It's people of color who are being killed, black people who are being killed, mostly black men who are being killed. And in Kenya, it is the same. So when I trace it back, I look at colonialism and find the link once again, because the brutality that meted the people of Kenya when they were struggling for freedom in the 50s is the same brutality that has been carried forward up to now. So the only thing that has changed is the color. So you find that the policeman is black, whereas during the Mau Mau times for freedom struggle, the police were largely white. So that translates now from race to class. And I believe that class is a child of racism. And that is what we are grappling with right now. So what is happening in Zambia, what is happening in Uganda, where police brutality is also on a very, very high level, and what is happening in Tanzania and other places actually gets to a point where it's not even being reported. So on the ground, what we're trying to do is to push these cases to the forefront so that people of the world get to know that the George Floyd case is not isolated. The Amadou Diallo case is not isolated. It is happening all over the world. So what we need to do, my feeling is that all these struggles need to connect, need to come together so that we are able to uproot a system that is wrong.
And Penny, that approach that Githuku is suggesting, how does that look like to you? How would we synergize efforts so that all these issues are tackled?
When we set off, obviously, this going to Kenya was a more recent thing of us looking at racism and racialization and how it manifests itself, but feeling that the root cause of it is, as I say, colonial legacies. The move to internationalism was to try and connect all of that, because we recognize that the seeds, the poison that was put in when the colonizers arrived, which is why we were giving the example of what is the violence of US is not different from the violence that happened when the British came to Kenya, when the British and the same with France and other places where they killed people in like multitudes or numbers. But the problem we have, and maybe this is also intentional in terms of the power and the systems of that we kind of look at things in kind of single issues as opposed to how it connected they all are. If we see, like I think Remy explained, that the apparatus, the police are an apparatus that was put in those countries, and we've continued carrying on. If we understand this as something that was planted that needs working on, that needs uprooting, and then that will perhaps bring an opportunity for solidifying, which is what we have done with, for example, again, Kenya, but also reaching out to other places. Githuku is kind of giving examples of Uganda, Tanzania, and what you're saying about, Zambia. We've had similar stories in Malawi and other places. But if people can see beyond and see actually, yeah, it's not a single issue, then we're likely to kind of push forward together, but also to resist wholesomely, because, I'll stop there because I've got another example, but I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure it will come in handy at some point. Did you want to come in there, Remy?
Just to reiterate what's been said, really, I think if we're looking at the root and we're really trying to grapple with that, then we come to think about colonialism. And if we think about colonialism, that was an international, cross-border endeavour, an attack. And if that was international and its effects are international, then our responses really have to be international. So it's about us having dialogue across national borders, which themselves are a colonial imposition, and seeing looking at resistance struggles from different places and seeing how we can draw on those in our own locations. So we have to, at the same time, work locally, see what works in our location, but also think globally. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do with the connections we're developing. Great. And of course, as well, we should say, I think it's important to say we're not the first people to do this. This has been part of Black struggle for centuries, throughout history, Black people have tried to make these connections. Perhaps it's been lost a little bit in recent years. Marcus Garvey did it. Countless people have done it, and we're trying to recapture some of that spirit, I think.
So we're being responsive to our current circumstances, but definitely same struggles, really, if we think about it critically. In 2018, the Racial Justice Network gave us a bit of a guideline on 5 ways to disrupt racism. One of those was reporting to the police when you've been attacked. I wonder how that looks to you today, Penny. I see you smiling because how does that look to you today, and what's the alternative if you're thinking there's an alternative to that? Because I don't think there's trust between the Black community and the police globally.
Yeah, no, I think I laughed because did a media thing the other day, and that was the thing that they wanted, and that's the thing that they played about reporting. And some of the work that we're doing here is around really challenging the police and highlighting. For those who don't know, maybe beyond the shores, we have what is called the hostile environment, which is a policy that was created to ensure the country, people here, is so hot for migrants that they want to leave or do not want to come here, which meant everybody's become border force. The hospitals, they're asking for your passports and wanting to know who and how long you've been here. The driving licenses, employers, education institution. So we've said, so essentially everybody's become the border force, but also more so the police. So we've had incidents where people are reporting incidents, and rather than the police checking and you being a victim being addressed to, they become the people checking you, who you are. And I think there was a horrible situation where a woman went to report a rape and then ended up being locked up because she was undocumented. So it's made me feel like when I did that film so far back was the response of, I was really asking people to move away from expecting the victim to be the only person who can report a crime. I was saying, if you witness something, do something about it. But the reporting, recognizing that by anybody going in to report, if you're Black, you're migrant, you're a person of color, the situation could actually turn against you. I felt like I did, like as if it's done the police a favor, because I also found out that they're using the video to encourage people to report. But one of the pieces, I had a meeting beginning of the year where the police were saying they've been awarded excellent for reporting. The other downside to that is actually, with all these numbers of people who've gone to report crimes, the resolving or kind of the solutions to the cases is not very good. So 1 in 10 people actually, only 1 in 10 people get convicted, which means 9 people are probably not getting support or nothing happens. So all these numbers have actually not done anything. So a way forward is, I think, just to look out for each other as communities and to understand all of these kind of harms that are happening around us. Because Remy will probably comment about wanting kind of the whole, when we spoke about police, why do we have police anyway? Are they there to protect us? Are they there to make things or situations worse for us? So it's almost moving back to community support, community-led work, where people look out for each other as opposed to relying, because that could cause other harms. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Remy, Penny called you into that, but could you also talk about allies as well? I really have a challenge on how we expect other people to help in reporting, and ideally we should have allies from the white community that should be working with us on these things. But as you respond to what Penny asked, could you also include a bit on that?
Yeah, so in terms of the question about reporting to the police, I think we need to be imagining futures without the police. We've had pasts without the police. We need to be thinking about what a future might look like without this oppressive institution managing everything that we do. And that's hard because we've lived with the police for a long time, but it's not impossible. We need to think about ways to defund the police, to shift funding from institutions like the police to youth centres, community centres, libraries, youth workers, to invest in our schools, to invest in the social fabric of our societies. But suggesting that people report to the police, I think we have to have some pragmatism as well. The society we're in at the moment, sadly, for justice, we often have to go through processes that include the police and the criminal justice system. So it's about a balance, being critical of these systems and knowing that they're very, very limited for Black and brown people, and also having a vision for something much larger. In terms of the allies, yeah, we people of color, black people, we really need white people to step up and be allies in times like this. And it looks to me like we're in a bit of a moment where people are seeing what's going on is unavoidable. They have to face up. It's on our news. It's everywhere on social media. There's no sitting on the fence. I think people need to choose which side they're on. They're either on the side of oppressive states or on the side of the masses of the people, particularly people of colour. And I think there are allies doing that work. There need to be more. And yeah, it's very, very important that people take up that mantle and do that important work.
Thank you. In the context of that, Penny, I'll come to you after I speak to Givuku, but I would like you to start thinking about the white privilege training that you guys have got, and I'll ask you a question about that because it relates to the allyship. Givuku, Migration Matters Festival is about the artists, the art, using art. I think if I had to borrow your term, it's primarily an artivist sort of a festival because we highlight issues such as these ones, refugees, asylum seekers. So it's about challenges around the world. How do you see this current platform that we've had where the world is starting to speak up a bit more and becoming more visible about racial injustice? How do you see artists taking this forward so it's not just a moment and it becomes something people will be aware of longer and do something about?
Yeah, that's interesting because as an artist, I don't know how to be an artist without the connection of social justice. So seeing I recite, I present what I believe in matters of social justice. But for artists who really are not in the mainstream of human rights and the struggle, it is the time for them to realize that their voice matters. It is the time for artists to not only say give money when somebody has been shot, but to actually put their voice in the cause. It is time for them to also be educated. Maybe it is for us to reach out to them and to ask them to not only wait for somebody to be shot, for them to come up and give some bail money or funeral expenses to be covered. And it's a good thing what they're doing, but it means that they are starting to become aware that it is important. Their voices are important. So in Kenya, we don't have quite a number of those. I can count them, you know, people like Giuliani, we had people like the hip hop group, Koflani Mau Mau, Kala Mashaka, you know, who sang and did their art for change. So we don't have many of those, and we need them. We need the voices. We need people who are idolized by youngsters to actually come and rally the people against a system that is gone wrong all over the world, not only in Kenya, but globally. So the more we have more artists speaking out, the more we will fasten these and hasten the oppression that is going on. Police brutality, for example, is one thing that I think people sometimes avoid to discuss because it hasn't gotten to you. But it is something that can come to you anytime because police can shoot from anywhere and anytime. And at the end of the day, they'll say, you know, that was a stray bullet. But a stray bullet that has already killed you means that you are silent. You cannot talk. You cannot speak. So apart from artists, everybody, you know, should actually make a point of standing up before everybody else is has deserted or has left the scene as a result of police brutality and oppression. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you'll find yourself alone with nobody else to talk for you. So this is the time, and I guess the George Floyd, the Amadou Diallo, the Vaite of Kenya, the Willie Kimani, a lawyer who was tortured to death, you know, 2 years ago in this country. it is time for us to always raise our voices, to come together and to join against any form of brutality and killings that may happen at any point. So my call is to all artists. You don't have to see yourself as a human rights activist. No, you don't. You just have to see yourself as a human being. And once you see yourself as that, then it means you should speak for human beings. So if you have talent, then use that talent to make sure that you speak for the people.
There's a great saying, I think it came from Stuart Hall, the black academic cultural theorist. He often spoke about the need to struggle where you are, and other people have used the idea of digging where you stand. And I think that really speaks to what Kiduku is saying here. If you're an artist, you should be using that arena to support the struggle for social justice. If you're an academic like myself, you should be writing and working in service to social justice and social movements. If you're a lawyer, your pursuit should be in service of the people and not of major corporations. And we can say that in everywhere we are in society, whatever our vocation is, we should be looking to be working in service to social justice.
Brilliant, thank you. Penny, I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about the training that that Racial Justice Network, the training package that you have where white people teach each other about white privilege and racism. I wanted to get a bit of insight and just to get people to hear about it a bit more as well. I think it's important.
Yeah, the course, so the Racial Justice Network has race at the core of our work, or race analysis. And we felt this was necessary because people have such difficulty talking or understanding not just the harms, but how it manifests itself. And majority of our work in the organization, and it's important to mention and point this out, is predominantly in Black and brown communities. So the percentage or the effort that we put in towards the white, the course for the unlearning racism was small, but we felt it was significant and likely to actually improve, or if not make anti-racism better. And this is partly to do with being in mixed spaces, which are usually with white people, well-meaning white people who cause harm and continue to cause harm to Black and people of color because of maybe lacking analysis or misunderstandings. We were interested in finding people who really, really are committed to helping dismantle the structures, but have some maybe not a complete clear understanding of what that means. We were interested in people who are bold enough to really look at themselves, because we've said time and time again, when we bring race conversation, the first and the most immediate thing people do is to look at Black person as the answer, or just talk about what it means to be Black. So we wanted to turn the lens on what it means to be white, but move the conversation on to how can you use that, understanding how race is created or was created, as we say, as a concept, but also what you can do with the privilege you have because you're a white person. We wanted to move away from a lot of the conversations around white saviors, and we know especially when you go again in Kenya, growing up in Kenya, knowing how we perceive white people, how white people are treated around us, but at the same time, or they think they need to do good, whether it says NGOs or whatever it is. So we wanted to move away from that, have people who really have conscious, but also moving the conversation around empowerment or supporting anti-racist work systemically, rather than just superficial for brownie points or just for career progression or things like that. So we've done the first lot, and the way this space is done is the facilitators we've coached and mentored. So it's not like just anybody, and it's those facilitators that we hold and we check in with, but this space is predominantly for white people, so they can deal with the emotions that emerge out of learning some things. I don't know whether you, I'm sure you have been in spaces where a person of color gets up to talk about the experience, and a lot of people in the room are moved to tears, and then the focus becomes the people who are crying in the room as opposed to the person who's narrating the trauma of experiencing and living as they do. So So there's a lot of emotional management that happens when those feelings emerge for them. So the way this one is actually whatever emerges is dealt with by them. We're not there to hold, and we're not having to do all that emotional labor. There's still intellectual labor that we put into it, but we're not there, for example, to hold all of that. But then as they finish the focus being the application of that learning. So it's not so that they don't know how to mess up. It's so much around how they apply that knowledge within anti-racism work. And that's now what's becoming the collective, the Unlearning Racism Collective, because once they finish, they're also giving back, and giving back sometimes from, you know, behind the scenes. They're giving back in different ways. So yeah, that's the Unlearning Racism. And it's something that's still kind of unfolding. We've had interest from all over, including Kenya actually, which was really interesting because we spoke about it when we were in Kenya during the decolonizing education trip. But also the universities here, different local authorities who are interested in the package itself. And I think it's useful because it's sitting in within us as opposed to hanging somewhere else. So we know if it's a little bit more authentic in terms of how it's been done or created. But yeah, I don't know whether Remy wants to add anything else, but that was the reason behind creating it.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Remy. Yeah.
I think one of the key points about it for me that's absolutely vital is that there's an emphasis placed on it being an ongoing process. So it's not the case that white people come along and they do this course for 10 weeks and all of a sudden they are a qualified anti-racist. It's that it gives them the foundations and they have to keep checking in. And Racial Justice Network will remain an organisation led by Black and Brown people. But the reality of organising in the UK is the majority of the population is white, so we do need to find and draw on our allies. And the majority of the population who are white have more access to resources than the black population do in the UK. It's also about working with people who are within our spectrum of allies. So it's people who might be receptive to arguments about anti-racism. We're not trying to convince the far right. We're not trying to convince racists. We're trying to work with those people who show some kind of willingness to stand on our side.
Great, brilliant. So both you and Penny spoke about foundations. I don't know if you picked that up. So you both spoke about the foundation. So I imagine that when you're talking about decolonizing education, you're talking about breaking that foundation and building it from where it needs to be built, bringing in histories in a way that is truthful. How do you see that working in the UK, especially with the education system that glorifies colonialism, that literally just makes the empire look like this amazing thing that did not disproportionately affect communities and left a legacy of the discrimination that people face today?
Should I take this?
Happy for you to take it.
Yeah. I think it has profound implications. Education has been a key tool of colonialism, a key tool of enslavement, whether it's been withdrawn to stop black people being educated, or whether it's been a colonial education that celebrates Britishness, whether that's in Kenya or here in the UK. And that's still today the shape of our education. It means that white students are educated to have a sense of entitlement, to see themselves as superior. At the same time, it means that black students of colour, are educated not to understand the histories of their countries, not to understand the structural racism that shapes societies. And that's not to say that black and brown people don't get that education, because I think we find that they do. They find it in education settings and in families. But we're talking about institutional education, whose purpose, I think the purpose of institutional education is to reinforce the power of the middle classes and reinforce the power of the white majority. And I think talking about decolonising education, to look at how colonialism has shaped our education and try to imagine forms of education that work against rather than for colonialism.
Brilliant. Penny, were you, sorry, I had muted your microphone because there was a noise coming from it, but yeah, would you like to add on to that? You need to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I think I'd actually add to that and move it back to Kenya because definitely, so the PhD I'm doing is around colonial legacies, and I've identified education as one of the key pillars of what was started that continues beyond. So I know Remy didn't mention it particularly, but some of the Wise My Curriculum White as a campaign that was launched was perhaps pushing back on that element of what is taught and what is around. Going back to Kenya is almost similar. I've used the line around Audre Lorde's Master's Tools. So we were there in Kenya in 2019 in June, and I was really trying to question what I was taught in my school in terms of the history, not the history of our people, the history of movements, but also the amazing history that goes and kind of beyond colonialism, because that is also, it doesn't, because we say our history doesn't start with the enslavement and colonialism, and how useful that education system is. So the way you're taught to, obviously we learn in English, but everything else that you see in the books that you read in my history, and mom being a history teacher, and if you kind of confirm this, was around, I mean, I think Givuku put it better, but what we were taught, and it's all that whole elevation of whiteness and celebration of and wanting to connect and be like, that I think has robbed us of a lot as Black communities, and maybe continues to. So this is partly why we wanted to go back to Kenya and link up and kind of start to think about the decolonial legacies of really, because there's buildings there that people walk past and do not know what the buildings mean. And that's also because even as after independence, maybe some of the conditions and the terms that were left behind were, we need to not make marks of this. And if people know that, then we're more likely to be have a more sense of self-worth, likely to feel like we create rather than constantly running to the West for all sorts of things, whether it's foreign aid, whether it's medication, whether it's, you know, all of those things that they've kind of completely killed off in terms of our own communities and cultures. But that sense of community that we had, that was robbed as well through capitalism, because capitalism is very much around individual, and that's why we have politicians that you said about police and what the police are doing to people. Why they respect politicians is because there's a sense people with power is people with money. So that was another thing that was brought to us that kind of needs to be moved away from. But it all kind of, education being the key, but with other things that are reinforcing it, that makes it a bit difficult to detach from.
Okay. Givuku, did you want to come in on that as well?
Well, yeah, I could. I'm sorry. Yeah, the sun is too direct on me, so I'm trying to run away. But yeah, you see, what we had here with the Racial Justice Network was really important because it's something that we do not talk about. Growing up as an African child, it is very sad when you later come to realize that all the history you've been taught is wrong. All the history that you've been taught is written by others. All the history that you have been taught does not reflect on you at all. Because when, in my case here in Kenya, as a student who loved history, I'm taught more of Sir Henry the Navigator and about David Livingstone, and being told that Ludwig Kraft is the one who discovered Lake Turkana or Lake Victoria. And Lake Victoria, you know, get that, Lake Victoria. That already there is a problem, you know. When your history is washed away, when your history is erased, then it means you don't have confidence in life. So individually, had I not interacted with Ngugi wa Thiong'o early enough, had I not interacted with Professor Issa Shivji, had I not interacted with radical intellectuals who have worked so hard, the professors Wangari Maathai, people like Maina Wakinyati, Katama Mkangi, some professors, people who are really not even known, but have worked so hard to correct the history. Had I not known them, had I not interacted at that time with them, then I would not be who I am today. So can you imagine that the rest of Kenya and the majority of Kenyans and the majority of Africans actually live on a false history? They believe in a false history, something faulty, you know, something that has been designed to look that way. So it was important for Racial Justice Network to come in at that time and talk to students. We went to the Alliance Girls High School. It's one of the biggest, you know, girls schools here in Kenya. But the system is the same. The system of education is the same. And they were really shocked when we started talking about Pio Gama Pinto, when we told them about Dedan Kimathi, when we told them about Mekatilili Wamenza, a woman who is not recorded anywhere in our history books, in our schools. Yet she is, in 1912, the one who protested against the slavery of Black people who are being taken to work in sisal fields, you know, and she was exiled and taken from Malindi to Gusii land. That's 100 kilometers away. The beauty about this queen, because I call her queen, I refer her to as Queen of Africa, Queen Mekatilili Wamenza, is that she broke out of prison and walked back to Malindi to continue with the liberation of our people. Why would such beautiful history not be told? Why would they not tell us about the victories of the Kenya Land and Freedom Army? So the reason is simple, is that our freedom was stolen. Our freedom was taken away in 1963 in Kenya's case. So the people who came into power, and that is, of course, President Jomo Kenyatta, really did not care about those who were fighting for freedom. Yeah. So he made sure that the history that was being taught in schools remained the same, and it made it easier for him to rule. And that has seen 3 other presidents, including his son, who is the current president, continuing with the same, you know, status quo. So we have to speak and we have to say it and we have to let them know that we are actually trying to correct our history. And unless we do that, unless we change the syllabus, unless we go into the syllabus, the system of education in Kenya and in Africa and in other places, then we are not going to change anything. So we might be in the streets shouting Diallo, shouting George Floyd, shouting Willie Kimani, shouting Pio Gama Pinto, all those who have been assassinated, JM Kariuki, Baimungi. We have so many, the list is endless, but it cannot change unless we have all the people learning or our children going into a system that is not biased, to talk more about colonialists and seeing colonialists as the heroes who discovered us and our lakes and our mountains, yet they were taken there by people who knew the route to where the mountain is. You know,
absolutely. So, there's a, I'll just stop you there just a bit. There's a very important point that you've raised there where you've recognized these women heroes in your history. And the history of women's, Museum of Women's History in Zambia has just recently been launched. And there are quite a lot of stories that are starting to come out as well, which I wish I had known as a child. I think the first time I actually heard about a woman hero from Zambia from historic times was when I actually moved from Zambia and I went to South Africa. Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, I went to South Africa and I learned about this woman who was a revolutionary called Alice Lenshina. I hadn't heard of her in Zambia, but if a Zambian child had heard of her right growing up, that would have changed her own identity growing up. But then I've also noticed that at the moment, Penny, I think this might speak to you as well. At the moment, with all the police brutality that we're talking about, a lot of women's stories have been lost in this as well. A lot of women have died at the hands of police. A lot of women have been discriminated against quite starkly. But this uprising that we see today only comes about when it's a man. What is the problem? Your microphone is muted, Penny.
was saying, I think that erasure hurts. And it also doesn't do any justice because it fragments this sort of movements, because as you would, you know, if you're being asked to go and support something and then you feel it's not about us, or you're not even recognizing our existence and our pain and our harms, then people go and set off another one, which then actually weakens the whole big thing. And I think so. It's a really important and key point at the moment where we're talking about George Floyd. There's a woman who was shot, and I think there's been campaigns who were saying hers wasn't recorded, and the guy who shot her is not even being looked up. And this seems to be like an all-round thing. I know when Sandra Bland was attacked and obviously arrested because he was recorded, there was a big uproar as well. And there's been others even here in the UK where women are murdered. But I think there is something for those men who kind of stand with us, our brothers, and kind of want to kind of support not just the feminist movement, but bigger and wider, to really check and ensure that those voices are remembered. And that goes for those who are also kind of supporting, whether it's activism. We've had, for example, Diane Abbott, who's been an MP here, a politician here for quite a while. Any attack, the level of attack. So we talk about the harms, and I know even personally within this work, reminding people of the fact that as a woman, as a Black woman, as a migrant, there's experiences that I have that men would not have, of being overlooked and all sorts of things. So, and the labor that it takes to get up because of those experiences. So I think it's a good call to remember the women, but also to support and stand in solidarity with, whether we're asking for it or not, because even though we might not always speak about it, it's there, and we're aware that we're still being invisibilized.
Absolutely, thank you. Speaking of another woman that Givuku mentioned, Wangari. Wangari, to me, she opened up my eyes to appreciating nature. And Remy, I noticed that when you went to Kenya, that is something that stood out for you, land rights and land. And would you like to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think it was interesting when we were in Kenya because there was an awful lot of overlap, a lot of connections between our understandings. But something that really struck me, learning from Gituku and others, is that effort to connect with the land, to understand something beyond humans, to think about the way people before us have connected with the land, the way we use the land. And yeah, I think just that connection is something we really don't have in the UK, that's been lost, and is something that I think we should look to recapture. And I think it speaks to the nature of this relationship, and it not just being, you know, traditionally it's been a colonial relationship in which people in Kenya would be expected to learn from people in Britain. But I think what we saw on this trip, and what we should really emphasise and cling on to, is that people in the UK perhaps have far more to learn from our siblings on the African continent than the other way around. An appreciation of nature is one such aspect.
Thank you. So, well, we're almost coming up to the end of the show, but what I would really like to hear about now is what next for Racial Justice Network, what's happening, what should we expect? Kenya or the UK?
I might go first, and then I think Remy's already alluded to Givuku being RGN for sure. We are kind of hoping, because what we started there was really to open those conversations, for example, around, because I think, the frustration was people thinking that there's no racism or in Kenya. So we were talking about internalized racism, and people to really see what we see or experience or have now is a root cause. What we intend to do is perhaps build on that work, whether it's projects that are already going on, and support those conversations to continue to happen without us. And then if if and when we do get another opportunity, because it was a really brilliant trip, like I say, to for me on a personal and obviously political level, but on a personal level, having, you know, been born and bred there. So perhaps to go back again and perhaps continue to build on that. We were able to, one of the focuses we wanted was to bring academia and activists together, because the previous trip we hadn't experienced or seen that, and say activists as well, because there is that disjuncture. Even though this one is saying is doing whatever they're doing for change, and this one is doing, they're not necessarily kind of correlated. So we were trying to do that, and that we want to try and support and for that to continue to happen, to continue to grow. And in terms of other work with IGN, because I just say it and then I'll stop and then the rest can just finish. It is the same. So I've been lucky enough to link again with other groups in Brazil, and I forgot they've actually also started an unlearning racism course, because that was the one thing that they really picked up from my presentation. But we're supporting sisters there because the murder, and I think this is also really important to remember, there's more Black children and more Black men and more murders committed by the police there than there is in anywhere else in the world, including the US. And that's not heard because it's not kind of Western, they're not English speaking countries, but it's really important to remember that that is also happening there. So we're going to try and continue supporting that. But in terms of here, we will just mobilize, as we have been doing with Black and brown communities and allies who continue to step up and move and grow, but ensure that we're not just looking at one thing. It's like we said about working locally, but kind of thinking beyond, which is the internationalism and how we draw all of those strands together. It's climate, it's, you know, class, it's gender, it's sexual orientations, everything kind of to continue bringing them together to move forward as a solid entity.
Remy, go ahead.
I think Panina's captured it there, but our vision is to become more international. As an organisation who's focused on colonial legacies, we know that we have to connect and make those connections, and those connections can be incredibly generative for us and hopefully generative for those that we connect with. So I hope we'll be able to return to Kenya, and I hope we can find ways, particularly with the increase of the virtual and digital world, for us to build these connections. I don't think we should underestimate how much work it takes. We're fighting fires here in the UK in terms of what's going on, so it takes a forward vision to also be thinking about how we can make these international connections, and it'll be a slow process, but I think it's something that we're all committed to.
Kivuku.
Yeah, my take is that we already have what it takes. All we need to do is to plug in to whatever is going on in different places in the world. Everywhere you go, there are groups and organizations on the ground which have a commonality with what we are talking about. And that is already what we are doing. So in Kenya, for example, we have a network of artists, we have a network of activists, of people who are ready to voice what RJN, for example, is pushing. In the US, we have people like the Project South, based in Atlanta, but talking about people on the ground, like about against racism, against police brutality and all. So I think we already have what it takes. All we need to do is to plug in to the energies that are already happening, the energies that are already pushing for change on the ground, and that will be it. So for me, I really think that the energy also should come from those who have fought for change in the past. You talked about the Zambian woman, you know, who is really unsung. I also know of a Zambian woman who is called Julia Chikamoneka, but nobody talks about her. Nobody, she's not in the history books. So unless we recognize our past, unless we praise those who started the struggle and appreciate what they did, then it will be really hard for us to deal with what we are dealing right now, because we will think maybe we are the pioneers, or we are the only ones, and we are not strong enough. But we are strong. We have changed before. We can change now for the future.
Thank you so much, Gethuku. I really love the noises in your background. You forget what you're missing when you're not at home. Is it a peacock?
It's a goose.
It's a goose.
Three geese.
Lovely. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So thank you so much, Racial Justice Network. You've just really wrapped up this in a very nice package of resisting, remembering, and repairing. So Migration Matters Festival continues up to the 20th of June, and we would really love you to engage by going on our various platforms, including that of Racial Justice Network, and just see a lot more about their work, especially at this crucial time when there's engagement around issues around race, colonialism. You've been with me, Chiwe Chihana, for African Voices platform. Thanks for joining us.